Let me mention a couple of issues that we've talked about before, but I think it is significant because what I'm concerned with here also applies in a lot of other areas. We authorized actually this Red River Chloride project way back in the 60s, and then in the '07 bill, which you were here and familiar with at that time, it was authorized to continue the work, and that would have actually been all at a federal expense. Now, the problem we're having right now, and this is always a frustration, we're sitting around waiting until the planning can't be completed until 2016. And yet, just less than 30 miles away, we have already, down in Texas, right across the Red River, we already have a project very similar to this. The planning would be about the same, the environmental impact studies and all of that. Now, I'm going to be asking if we could have that as part of the consideration so we get this thing moving. It's something we've been working on since the 1960s. Maybe, General, do you have a memory of this particular project?
Senator, I don't have a good memory, just kind of surface on this one, but I could get back with you on that.
Well, yeah, because here's the problem. If the planning won't even be done in 2016, there's no reason for that because it's essentially the same planning. In fact, I have another on the next issue, a very similar thing. It seems to me, as we look at things like this, and I look at it as a citizen would look at it, that we have something that's going to be done someday. It's been authorized, it's all agreed upon, and yet there is always some obstacle that holds it up. In this case, it's the planning, but I contend it would be the same planning as we would have it's already taken place down in Texas. So only request I have is I'd like to have you look at it carefully and see if because the planning is taking place, if this could shorten that time frame so that we could get started on the project. Then the other thing that I know you're familiar with, because we talked about this in my office, is we have been very successful. I think I mentioned this in the opening statement. I think Georgia and Oklahoma were the most successful in putting these demonstration projects, lake projects, to work. Now, the interesting thing about this is everyone up here is concerned, all they talked about is money and the cost, the fact that we don't have the money. These don't cost any money. These are demonstration projects that were there because they don't cost money, and it induces the private sector to venture the capital and to get involved in these things. The one in northern Oklahoma has been very, very successful. Now, the project that is in Lake Eufaula is one that if we could do it the same way we did it in the project up in Skytook, as you and I talked about in my office, then it would be something where you could go ahead with this one project and not have to do a lake plan on the entire lake. If you did it that way, I can assure you, if we had done it that way up in Skytook, it still wouldn't be done today. Now it's already done, it's prosperous, employing people, and it's developing in the economy. It's a good program. So what I'd like to get is an idea as to whether or not you would use some of the flexibility that we have and apply some of the same techniques to that project in Eufaula that we discussed as we did successfully up in Skytook. Recognizing that people paint themselves into a corner sometimes and say, well, this can't be done, then you have to cover for somebody else. But that seems reasonable to me. Does that sound reasonable to you, Madam Secretary?
It sounds reasonable, Senator.
Well, I appreciate that. And just one short question. Do you think it would be necessary for anyone who's waiting to go through with the project to have to hire a lobbyist or an attorney in order to get that done?
No, sir.
I knew that would be your answer, and I agree. Lastly, on the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan, you know, we've executed the feasibility cost share agreement, which we talked about in my opening statement. And there are a lot of things that I want to ask for the record, but I'll just ask this one question now. In light of the scarce resources and the continuing resolution, we don't know how these things are going to turn out, but assuming that those resources are unusually scarce, how will the Corps determine which projects with executed cost share agreements will be supported with those resources? Do you have a plan that you could share with us?
You're talking about the rest of this fiscal year, sir?
Yes.
Well, depending upon what kind of appropriation we get, whether it's a continuing resolution through the year based on
I
2010 levels.
suspect strongly, Madam Secretary, it's not going to be adequate, so you still have to prioritize.
Right, that's where I was going. We're going to have to prioritize. If we get a continuing resolution through the rest of this fiscal year, we'll develop a work plan based on what was in
On
2010.
what criteria you would use. Oh, and then you could perhaps share that with us during
Yes,
the
we have,
development of that criteria.
in the past, it's been a 30-day turnaround time for a work plan that's approved.
Yeah. And the last question is, what do you like better, that side of the bench or this side?
You don't have to.
I think I know. Thank you very much.